winning the enterprise is really, and winning a more traditional sort of PLG motion, it's almost like two separate companies. I think it's a very different way you think about building product, different way you interact with customers, and certainly a very different way to go to market. And as a result, I think even the talent is it's usually quite separate across the whole company. Even how finance and legal and HR supports an enterprise company versus a more traditional bottoms-up PLG company, I think it's very different. So the big idea here is it's really friggin' hard, really hard, because it will feel like you're building two businesses at the same time. I think the big mistakes companies make over and over again when I see is when they try to blend. They think they can just seamlessly evolve, and as they scale into an enterprise company, I think it's a lot more complicated than that. If it feels like you're building two companies at the same time, that might be okay.
Most founders' intuition is that you can blend it together. And the case I'm hearing you make, which very strongly resonates with me, is that intuition is actually incorrect.
There's at least a dozen successful multi-billion-dollar private and public companies that started as PLG, and from the outside it looks like, they morphed into being an enterprise company and they got to multi-billion. And so for most PLG companies that are like, sub 10 million, 20 million in valuation, they're like, they see those as examples, prime examples. People here talk about Slack all the time. Look at that, become enterprise, and now they're in Salesforce. So we can be the next, we can ride that wave. We can just take their playbook. People a lot of times over-index on precedents and without really thinking about what were the drivers for certain outcomes that led to, like, for example, Slack's success. The second reason, I think, is because a lot of founders I met are phenomenal, super smart, and there's a lot of pride in being a first principle thinker. And so being a first principle thinker, what you do is you look at the data in front of you and what information you're receiving. For a PLG company, this is how you build intuition. You first throw your product out there. A lot of people use it, and you're getting a lot of user love. Awesome. The next phase, your product is actually being adopted in enterprises, and a small subset of those enterprises actually reach out and say, hey, I see that a bunch of people are using your product. And so instead of a 10K deal, you go from a 50 to 100K. Your own customers, they're very happy, and they're saying, hey, I want to buy more. I will give you this money if you build me all these like security features. And you're like, well, I'm a first principle thinker. That's very logical. People love my product. And so your intuition's like, oh yeah, of course, let's start building the security stuff. And then the next phase, what happens is, like, as you build the security stuff, it does unlock major expansion within your customer base, right? The companies where you have good organic usage, many of those companies will start paying you 25, 50, 100, 200K. And so you're taking in this data and you're like, wow, it's working, until you don't have enough accounts, until you're scaling out the sales team, the marketing team, and you just don't have enough accounts that have that kind of organic, bubbling up, organic usage. And then you hit the wall, and then you fall into what I call the PLG trap. But along the way, you see, every strategic decision you've made is super logical. And so that's why I think the intuition is like, oh yeah, this is a very linear and sequential way to build a enterprise company starting from PLG. And I think that's where the danger is.